We're back.
Yeah. Did we time that perfectly? Us rising from out of frame?
I think that worked out okay, folks. You tell us if you saw that silly beginning. And the funny thing is that maybe no one was watching yet. So folks, rewind, watch the beginning. Let us know. There's already a comment in there. What's that all about? Oh, that's us. Okay.
Oh yeah, that's a pre-programmed thing from.
Okay.
Yeah.
There you go. No worries. Steve, how's it going? I don't think I've really spoken to you all day. We've texted and emailed back and forth regarding some shizzle.
Yeah, I'm good. I'm doing well. What about you?
Doing good. This is my day today. Not doing it. I feel very underdressed for this episode, being that you're wearing a nice floral shirt. But yeah, folks, we have some news before we get into what this episode's all about. So go ahead, Steve.
Right. So this is Heaven and Earth 10th anniversary episode. But there was, like you alluded to, some huge news came out this morning regarding Steve Howe. He has a new solo album coming out titled Guitarscape. And while so I'll pull up the cover image for that. Just got to open a couple things.
And he's got an amazing drummer on it that is not me this time. Dylan Howe.
Right. On the drum. Yeah, it's Dylan Howe. Yeah, I'll go ahead and Yeah, and I'll go ahead and show the cover image for that, and then a press release. Wow, this is taking a while. Okay, here's the window, and there it is. Guitar, or is it showing? I can't really tell.
Not yet.
Wait.
So while Steve's doing that, this is really exciting news, and I hope that Steve Howe does tour with this. Who knows? But it's great that he's putting some new solo material out, and here it comes.
Okay, yeah, there it is. So you can see that now, right?
Yeah, it's interesting. It's like a double pane window, and you see the repeated reflection of the guitar, and there's trees and whatnot. So it's quite interesting. Got his Roger Dean logo.
Yeah. So this is coming out September 27th on his own House Sounds label. It'll be available on CD, vinyl, and digital downloads, including Dolby Atmos. And so Steve says he's focusing on what I do well and what I love to do. It'll have 14 new instrumental tracks, and wow. Steve plays acoustic, electric, steel, and bass guitars along with keyboards. So that's a huge thing. He says in a quote here, this album has given me the opportunity to do something different. I bought a Novatron Summit keyboard and found that it had a wealth of inspiring sounds. It gave me a golden opportunity to create my own keyboard structures, chordal movements, and structures I thought were a bit different. I think differently on the keyboard. I don't see the chords looking the same, but then I had fun playing around with the guitar to see where that goes. And, like we mentioned, Dylan is on it. He says, I began feeding the tracks to Dylan. We get on great, and he seems to know what to play around my guitar. It's almost instinctive. Dylan and I fit together really beautifully. We've had the chance to do this together, so it's wonderful. What do you think of the title? Because I kind of wonder if maybe there's a double meaning there. Like, it sounds like Guitarscape, like a landscape, but I have my own theory. What if it's also Guitar's cape, and maybe Steve wears a cape while playing keyboards,
That would be great. A unitard and a cape. Interesting. I'm kind of surprised, not disappointed, but surprised that it's all instrumental, no vocals. He wasn't in a lyrical or prose writing mode for this one around, but it's great. And it's just the two of them, yeah?
Yeah, I believe so.
That's cool.
I only saw the two of them mentioned in the press release, but yeah, hopefully we'll we're gonna see what we can do and be able to talk about this album. It'd be great to have Steve and Dylan on the show to talk about this. So we're seeing what can be done. But yeah, I'm very excited about this album.
Yeah, I
it feels like it's.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, yeah, I was gonna say it feels like it's been a minute since the last solo release, and like you said, waking up to news like this, that's happened quite a bit with some of these albums that we've heard about. And it's like once we wake up to that, it's like, oh, we gotta jump in and share this around and whatnot.
It was cool. His agency reached out to us also to see if we want the download and to schedule him, and it was quite a narrow window. So I usually Steve, as the producer, replies to these things, but I replied right away because it was 4:30 in the morning. It had come in an hour and a half prior our time, West Coast US time. And I thought, I want to let her know that this is the day that would work best because I travel for a little over a week after that. So we'll see how it goes. We'll let you know.
Yeah. It might be a tight window, but we'll see what happens. And either way, we're still going to talk about the album,
Yeah, absolutely. But now we'll talk about this other album that, wow, is 10 years old already, which is interesting. And we'd love to get your thoughts, folks. We've got some fan comments and everything. But Steve, why don't you give context to when Heaven and Earth came out? Chris Squire's last album with the band.
Yeah, so this came out July 16th, 2014. And, I was looking up like what was going on around then. And it kind of looks like it was a period that was sort of in between periods when a lot more stuff was happening. But basically, Jon Davison sung lead vocals on Glass Hammer's Ode to Echo album, which came out March 2014. He sang some of them, and Carl Groves returned to the band to sing the rest of the lead vocals on that. Jon Davison switched his commitments to Yes. And that same month saw the release of Gravitas by Asia. So that album was after Steve Howe left Asia to focus more on Yes. And it's a very strong album, their last studio album, and one of my favorite Roger Dean paintings on that one. And later in that year, Pink Floyd would release The Endless River. So it had like some archival stuff from the late Richard Wright, and they put some other stuff. So it was kind of new, but I feel like there was, like I said, it felt like this was kind of an in-between period in a way. You had other bands like Transatlantic putting stuff out, but as far as the bands that we know more intimately, I guess you could say, we're a lot more familiar with their music and history. It felt like there wasn't as much happening as in other years.
Yeah, often when we celebrate anniversaries of albums and Steve goes through the context, often there's like 10 to 20 bands that are in, the classic prog world, from Saga to Tull to ELP or Asia related stuff, Rush. It's just so many. And you're right. There's kind of wasn't a lot going on at this time. And for context beyond that, I'm trying to figure out what was going on in the world at that time. For us, it was Drum Talk TV's second year. And I'm just trying to remember what I know. Nothing really stands out,
Well, for me, 2014 was a huge year because it was when I started going to UC Irvine, start college life.
I didn't count that.
No, but I started college. Yeah. I started college life that autumn. So when this album came out in the summer, I know it didn't get the best reception, but there were moments on this album that had me feeling really optimistic and looking forward to college life. So I do get a little bit nostalgic listening to this album.
It's interesting because you can tie those together. That's interesting. I want to read through the track list and who wrote what really quickly. Yeah. We're coincidentally, this time we're going to start with track 1. Uh, Believe Again, Davison, Howe, The Game, Squire, Davison, and Gerard Johnson. Step Beyond, Howe, Davison. To Ascend, Davison, and Alan White. In a World of Our Own, Davison, Squire. Light of Ages, Davison. It Was All We Knew, Howe. Subway Walls, Davison, Geoff Downes. Total running length is 51:28. And I'm going to reach back to what I'm going to mention now after we kind of critique the album ourselves or give our own personal thoughts. I find it interesting that
Yeah.
Geoff is only on one track and Chris is only on two and Alan is only on one.
Yeah, in terms of the writing, yeah.
Yeah, and I don't know. What do you want? Where do you want to go now? You want to start with the cover? We start from the outside and go in.
Yeah, we could start with the cover. So
Okay.
I'll go ahead and share that.
And I have it in the background because I've been listening to the album.
Yeah. Let's see. Share screen.
And this was at the
window.
exhibit.
Yeah, I actually have a picture from the exhibit, so I'll show that as. Wait, hang on.
While Steve's doing that, we got to see this up really close when we shot the documentary in San Francisco of Roger Dean and Freya Dean's exhibit. And up close, this thing's amazing. Well, even from far back. Yeah. But the detail of this thing is just, it's a beautiful album cover. I like it. It's this weird above surface glacier, topographical glacier. There's an album title for you. It's almost like that top dome was more at sea level and then this thing rose up or something to expose the underneath. It's quite an interesting cover.
Yeah, like right here is the painting as we saw at the exhibit in San Francisco a couple years ago. And there's the album cover. Now, Steve Howe says it was his idea to do the zigzag pattern in the Yes logo. And at the time, I thought it was kind of unusual. Like, I felt like something like that would be more fitting for the Drama album cover. Mm-hmm. But so much time has passed that I'm now very much used to this being on the cover of Heaven and Earth.
Yeah, it is so different. Not just the pattern, but the fact that it's stark black and white and everything else is so colorful. I mean, it certainly pops off of it, but it's interesting.
Yeah, it's incredible. And I actually have my physical copy right here. I'm going to stop sharing this. And so, yeah, this is my physical copy of the Heaven and Earth CD. And here's how the inside looks.
Trifold, right?
Yeah, it's a trifold. And I got the booklet in it, autographed by Jon Davison during the Topographic Drama Tour back in 2016.
Cool.
Yeah. So I really like the packaging of
the packaging is great.
Yeah. So do you want me to talk about what the band members have said about the production process, or do you want to do the critique of the material first?
Wherever you want to go. And when you do talk about the band members' mentions, give context to when that was. Was it around the time of the recording or was it many years after that?
Right. Yeah, I've got a mixture of both. So first we'll start with comments that were coming out around the time of its release. So this was from a Prague article that got reposted earlier today. And they interviewed Chris and Alan from the looks of it. So when asked if the album would be like able to satisfy appetites for multi-part sweet songs or more concise material, Chris said this album's got a bit of both. There are a couple of longer, more complex tracks, and there are a few that are relatively simple and songy. It's a good blend. And, at this time, Chris seemed very aware that there would probably be like some people who would like it, some people who wouldn't. And he mentioned that for a bit, they were kind of wondering whether they should do a new album, since apparently Fly From Here cost them quite a bit of money to do, but ultimately decided that it was worth doing to cement Jon Davison as the new vocalist of the band. Because you got to remember, they had Benoit David from 2008 to 2012, and then Benoit, because of his condition that came about from all the touring, like he wouldn't be able to keep singing on par for them, so they got Jon Davison. And by this point, he was in Yes for about 2 years. And I think at that time, when Jon Davison was just coming into the band, I was not as on the pulse with what was going on with Yes, because I was really busy with the end of high school and all that stuff, but I would see live clips here and there on YouTube. But I feel like Heaven and Earth was like a more proper introduction to me for Jon Davison in Yes, in a way, if that makes sense.
It was.
And in this article, you also have Alan commenting on how, during the Paris sessions, there were a lot of things going on, like the members were like going to restaurants, and it might have been like sort of extravagant lifestyle type thing, but he says this time around things are more controlled. So, and again, it's Roy Thomas Baker who did the Paris sessions and was now producing them for Heaven and Earth. And what do you think of that decision before I read some of the other comments?
I find it odd. I find it, no offense to Roy Thomas Baker, he's done some great work, and he's done some work I'm not personally so favorable about. I don't know why they chose him. I don't know why. So I'm not totally on board with that, but I had nothing to do with it, so I can't take the blame. No, what I mean is who the fuck am I, right? But I don't get it. I've never heard why or read why or what.
Right. Yeah, because in the 70s, he had a reputation with the Cars and Foreigner. So I can see why, they might think, oh, let's work with this producer who's gotten some clout with these other things. But, with Yes, I don't exactly know if it was a fit that could have worked. So it was really odd when they sort of came back to him 35 years later.
Yeah.
And there's and Miguel Bass is watching. He says, and Queen. Yeah, of course.
Yeah, Queen. I was going to mention that. Yeah. And I think the work he did with Queen was his best work for my taste. And when you think of the Cars and Foreigner, I just don't see the fit with Yes music whatsoever.
Right.
So
Yeah.
I don't know what went on there.
Yeah, and skimming through Steve Howe's autobiography, All My Yesterdays, which we talked about a while back, he mentions that recalling 1979, we were not all convinced about the prospect of him coming on board again to produce us. He acted quite strangely, offering little enthusiasm for the tapes we prepared, and he didn't even notice when we reworked one of the songs while he kept visiting the bathroom. Even so, some thought we should still give him a try, and then, if it wasn't working, abort. And he mentions that the process of working with Roy on Heaven and Earth, it felt like Roy wasn't as enthusiastic about the material, and even made Jon Davison do way too many vocal takes.
Yeah.
And, more recently, Jon Davison has said that he got the sense that Roy was maybe going through a tough time. So I guess he gives him a little bit of a benefit of the doubt. But going back to Steve Howe, he says that to Roy, it was basically this feel of for Roy, he would have them do what's just good enough and not really trying to bring out the best in everything like a producer ideally would. And they were recording on Pro Tools. And eventually they would get Billy Sherwood to work on the mixing, and they weren't happy with what Roy was doing with the mixing. And they also did some mixing on Skype, which Steve says here was also a mistake because some stuff gets lost on that.
Totally. That's crazy, actually, if you think about it, especially like that. Like, what the heck?
Yeah, and Steve really wanted to, finish the album later in the year, but what ended up happening was they were rushing it before getting back on tour, and I think that's part of why this album didn't get like some of the energy that it perhaps could have gotten.
I think it's a good out, and it might be why, but I think overall the album lacks bravado, and I think the bravado would have come with the initial vision, and I think the initial vision just didn't have what it needed to be a much better album, regardless of how much time they had. That's just my take. That's a pretty harsh criticism from me to, one of my two very, 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 very favorite bands. But so I'll reach back to that other thing. Chris is only on 2 songs. Geoff Downes is only on 1, maybe because he was busy with Gravitas. And Alan's only on 1.
Yeah, and you're talking about the songwriting, just to be clear.
Yes. Yeah. And it seems like such a less of a group effort and group input. And even if one person alone wrote the song, it just seems like less of group layers of input. And it's interesting that the Asia album is called Gravitas, and this delivers to me just the opposite. It just it just isn't. It's just not there. I'm sorry, and it just doesn't resonate with me. There's a couple moments here and there, but I find it interesting that of all the albums, this one has the most odd writing credits on paper, or lack of, I think.
Yeah, I guess I didn't really think of that. And I should mention something I forgot to mention was Steve mentions in his book that Jon Davison made a point to visit each of the members, at where they live, in sort of the beginning of the making of this album.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that to me, this album is, I would say, a 6 out of 10. It's okay, but it definitely could have been better. I kind of think, some albums are able to be done within a shorter amount of time with a lot of meat to them. And
I'm sorry, Led Zeppelin did Presence in 2 weeks.
Right, yeah.
I mean,
well, I mean, they were younger, though, right?
Well, yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'm saying, like, it's not always like the same structure. Like each album is a different scenario. Like some albums could potentially be better if they let them cook a bit longer. And I do think that, if you listen to From a Page, there is sort of a similar energy. Like you can hear some of the gentleness that's there that also on here, but that one also had more like gravitas to it.
Yeah,
I guess we're using that word. But,
yeah.
So I do think that kind of shows a glimpse of how the Heaven and Earth material could have been potentially if some things were different in terms of how they were making it and approaching it.
Yeah. And like Miguel says, I know Chris wasn't doing well physically, but still there's a huge absence of a lot of factors that I think had been included in previous factors.
Right. There's also this quote from Jon Davison on his feelings of the album. So he said this last year. I really felt like Heaven and Earth was a huge disappointment, and I know I'm not the only one. And I'm just speaking candidly. I had such high hopes. That was my chance to sort of come full circle and prove myself as a well-rounded artist, not just one on stage, but one that could thrive in the studio. But the album never developed properly. The songs never got the full treatment and were never polished. So what we basically released was a series of demos, and that was a huge disappointment for me. So
That's
it
interesting.
seems like he's in the camp that the songs didn't really feel as
Yeah.
finished as it could be.
I think part of Roy Thomas Baker's stamp on this is the fact that Alan's drums, while they are crystal clear, probably thanks to Billy Sherwood in the mix, they don't have the Alan White sound or the punch, and I think that has to do with how they were tracked and how that process with Baker was done. It
Yeah,
just I feel bad saying all this because I'm not fond of the album. It doesn't resonate with me. I have one song, maybe two, and it's the last two songs on the album. Basically, are the two that to me have moments that shine, and that's "It Was All We Knew" and "Subway Walls." There's some other nice
yeah.
parts here and there, but it's I don't think I listened to it from the time it came out. That was the first time, until yesterday and today.
Right, the full album.
Yeah.
I think what's funny is to me, It Was All We Knew is like my least favorite on the album.
Oh,
It just feels like so quiet to me in some
well, that
ways.
happens, and you're a Holy Lamb freak, so go figure. I mean, think
Right.
of what you just said. But that's
Yeah.
fair. I mean, it's fair. There's different sensibilities that go with different things, even if they're in the same dynamic range or subtleness or whatever. So that's totally fair.
Yeah.
Are
And
there any other band quotes? Or I'm sorry, what were you gonna say?
sorry. Well, I'm done with the quotes, but I was just gonna move into like what my favorites are.
Okay,
Um,
please.
so I know that for a lot of people, the general consensus seems to be that Subway Walls is the favorite, and apparently Total Master Tane played that one live several years ago, which is really
Wow,
cool.
that'd be interesting to hear. And can I interrupt real quick? Because
Sure.
I'm remembering something. You know how I am about the beginning and endings of albums. And
Right.
for me, this album, I would have opened it with Subway Walls. I think that Believe Again is just for an anticipated album, new singer, following Fly From Here and all that stuff, to open with Believe Again, I just think was like, oh,
Oh,
I
what's funny is I have a different view on that.
really, wow, okay.
Yeah. So, Fly From Here definitely felt like an attempt to return to the drama of it all, drama of the album. So to me, Believe Again felt like an attempt to return to the sort of John Anderson spiritual type feel. And
Okay.
so when I first listened to the sample of Believe Again that came out at the time, I was taken with that song, and I love the lyrics and Believe Again. And it kind of, that song, lyrically, it reminds me of, when I used to believe in certain things and have more hope and be more optimistic, but I've changed over the years and I don't believe in certain things as much as I used to. It feels like such a relatable feeling, and I
But
like the imagery of it.
I
Um,
hope you still have hope and enthusiasm in things, and you're not now this crotchety, cynical old man about to turn 30. I
Uh,
mean,
I
you're
mean, I do have it. It's just kind of
okay.
different from
Okay.
how it was back then.
Now I will
Um,
say I think John's voice sounds great on the album, and he's not trying to mimic or sound like John Anderson. He leaves a mark that this is this vocalist's voice, and I totally appreciate that about this album. I want that to be clear.
right. Yeah. So for me, I would say the first half of the album does more for me than the second half. Like I thought that the game had some momentum. That actually has a bit of vocals that uh, came from the gift of love from a page. The do 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 do
Yeah,
do 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 do. And I thought Step Beyond had a gnarly intro. The do 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 do. I
I
thought that
forgot
was
about that.
cool,
I do
and
like the intro.
I do think it's a catchy song. And To Ascend is my favorite track on the album. I
Mm,
memorized the lyrics to that. It feels very emotional and spiritual, and I even sang it in front of some friends when we had a karaoke thing during college, and they really liked it.
There was a karaoke version, or you sang it a cappella?
I sang it to. I think I played the song and sang along to it or something.
Okay.
So after that, in A World of Our Own, it's a blues shuffle thing, which I give them props for trying something different, but it does feel like it pales in comparison to the earlier tracks to me. And then Light of the Ages, I guess there is a bit of that spiritual feel, but it doesn't do as much for me. And like I said, It Was All We Knew is my least favorite. And then Subway Walls, I do think it has some of that type of energy, that oomph, that bombastic sound. Like I feel like it has hints of it, but doesn't quite get there all the way for me. It almost feels like a tease in a way.
Right.
You were gonna say something?
Yeah, I was sort of thinking at the same time. You kind of covered whether or not the album could have been better had they spent more time on it. John Anderson alluded to the fact that maybe that could have been the case.
Jon Davison.
Isn't that what I said?
You said Anderson by accident.
Oh, sorry. Well, I think he might think the same thing. Can't believe I said that. Yeah, so I don't know. It just doesn't have a place for me. And I don't feel that way about any other Yes album from Fragile Forward.
Yeah, what's funny is I think to both of us, it's our least favorite Yes album, but I still like it a little bit more than you do, probably.
Yeah.
So that kind of brings me to my next question. Would you want to see like an official updated edit of the album that's more beefed up, I guess you could say, with maybe Sherwood and Shellen adding and complementing Squire and White's contributions, and maybe Steve adding some more stuff and stuff like that? Maybe Jeff Ang stuff.
I have two ways of answering that. One is maybe with Billy having so much more experience since then, I'd be curious to hear how he would reimagine the mix. Not that it's a bad mix, because he's great at that, but maybe he would bring other stuff out of it that isn't quite there. I don't care to see anybody go backwards and add stuff in. And I think when it does come to the mix, he only has what he has to work with. So I don't know how different it would be. So creatively, I wouldn't want stuff to be added in. Could the oomph be put in it from a different mix? I'm not sure, because the music itself, the compositions are still what they are.
Okay, yeah, I think part of me is curious, like how such a project would sound. But I also feel like, over the years, we've seen things redone, and sometimes at the expense of replacing the older thing. And I wouldn't want like the older thing to be replaced, even if it wasn't as good as it could have been. That being said, they did play a few songs that year on tour. They played Believe Again, The Game, and To Ascend, although I think they dropped one of those tracks after a little bit. And a couple years ago at the tribute to Alan White in Seattle, Jon Davison, singing To Ascend, like that was sort of a dream come true to me, hearing that song again, like in some form or fashion. Yeah. And, Alan co-wrote that song. So yeah, it makes sense. But is there anything that you'd like to see the current lineup perform from this album? I feel like I kind of know, but just go ahead.
I wouldn't mind seeing Subway Walls, and also the one you cited with the more intricate beginning. I forgot the name already, and I'm not looking at the list.
Step Beyond.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind seeing what they do with those two. And you got Steve Howe, you got the original singer, you got Geoff Downes, you got 3 of the 5 members.
Yeah, I think those two would be my picks as well, because
that
haven't played either of those live, and apart from the ones, it's funny. I think they pretty much played my top 3 favorite songs from the album on that year. So these other 2 would be like my next 2 favorites after those, and I think would be cool to bring out in the set. I do wish Yes would play more of the recent stuff and mix that with the classic stuff. Like that's an ideal situation for me.
Yeah. I'll move, if you don't mind, I'll move to start to read fan comments on the album that we got when we posted that we were going to do this.
Sure.
And we've got Barry Bartle says, is it like Close to the Edge and Relayer, or even like 90125? No, it's not, but it's still a nice album to listen to. Glad I've bought it, and it's been taken off Spotify for some strange reason. I didn't know that. Could it have been better? Maybe, but it's worth having, as it was Chris Squire's last Yes outing. I agree with all of that. It is a nice album. In fact, when I gave it the last listen this morning, I was thinking if this was a unknown band's debut album, this would sort of be the gateway to what someone's signature sound could be. You know what I mean? It's got a nice mix of stuff, but when you have 40 whatever years at the time of music from a band all given different lineups and whatnot, you still can't help but have some sort of expectation in some way. And I think this album misses that, but on its own, I totally agree with Barry. It is absolutely a nice sounding album.
Yeah, I can see that. And, even if it was like released much earlier in Yes's discography, I think people would have been more impressed then, like in the early 70s or something like that, maybe.
Yeah.
So then we have Kevin Caffrey, who says his favorites are Believe Again and To Ascend are very good. The Game is pretty good as well. Okay, so basically my top 3 on the album.
Yeah. Hey, Doug Curran, he says Subway Walls. Thanks for chiming in, everybody.
Yeah, and Joel Y. Perard, or Joel E. Perard, whichever is correct, says, I still like it.
Or is it Joel Y. Perard, or is it Joel and Perard, 2 people that gave an answer like, what's going on there?
Yeah,
just teasing Joel. I think it's Joel.
Yeah, but yeah, you would think I would know that after watching like 3 seasons of The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, and there's a character named Joel.
Great show.
No, yeah, it's excellent. But I do remember a while ago Joel mentioned that he made like his own playlist that has songs from Heaven and Earth, Fly From Here, and From a Page, and like mixed together, it just all sounds like Yes.
The same band, yeah.
Yeah, and maybe there's something to that. Like maybe a couple of these songs like wedged between some of these other grander Yes songs, maybe there's a better flow to that sort of thing.
That's a great point. And Marcel Belanger, I hope I'm pronouncing your name right, Marcel, says Subway Walls and Transcend. Or Subway Walls
and
Transcend.
Yeah, and I see there were 2 more recent comments. One is on the negative side, one's on the positive side. So I think you get 2 interesting sides of the coin here. So Roger Manito says the album should have been in the Muzak playlist. And so I think that's refers to music that kind of plays in the background. So he says, as someone who never used to miss a tour, bought a new LP needle to play every new Yes album when it came out. This album was worse than Open Your Eyes. About a year ago, my playlist on YouTube had ended, and they were playing similar songs, and a song came on that I did not recognize, and it seemed out of place in a prog playlist. I checked my phone to see which band it was, and it was Yes, Heaven and Earth. So, yeah, it sounds like Roger is not as into this or Open Your Eyes.
And I happen to love Open Your Eyes. I love that album. I want to read a couple here. I thought you were going to read one and I put it on the screen. Then you started reading something else. Sorry about that. Well, let's start here first. Miguel Bay says the game is a rework of a part of The Gift of Love.
Yeah, then, we mentioned that earlier.
Yeah, and then we've got Dawson Waters says, hey, I seen Asia last week.
Walters.
And yeah, and yes, twice, and listened to every Yes album. Awesome. And Miguel says, a good friend of mine wrote me the best description of heaven and earth. It's like your girlfriend tells you a little lie, but you pretend you believe it because you love her after all. Okay. That's
Um,
interesting.
yeah, that's a funny way to put it. So this last comment from Daniel Crone, he says, I love this album. I genuinely do. I think the reason it doesn't get as much love as, say, Fly From Here is when I wrote my review for the album 10 years ago, Heaven and Earth feels like a history of Yes album, where Fly From Here is a love story. To quickly go over the 8 songs and what era of Yes they showcase, Believe Again, very much the 2010s and could fit on Fly From Here. The Game, to me, has a big generator feel, so 80s. Step Beyond is very much The Ladder sounding song, so late 90s, early 2000s.
Interesting.
To Ascend feels very Wondrous Stories to me and is very late 70s. In a World of Our Own has an early Yes feel, easily could have been on the debut album, so 60s, I say. Yeah, I could kind of hear that.
Wow, that's interesting.
Light of the Ages, this feels very early 70s and could be a Lost Close to the Edge song. It Was All We Knew. Originally, I said this felt like a song from Magnification, but considering the Quest and Mirror to the Sky, it almost felt like a precursor of those.
Oh, yeah, I can hear that.
Yeah, there's definitely a song on one of those 2 albums that reminded me of It Was All We Knew.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And then he says Subway Walls to me is a mix of the Future and the Keys era. Yes.
I could hear that. That's a real thoughtful take to put all that together. Thanks for that. That's interesting.
Yeah. And he says, I still feel the album is strong and I'm proud of it. And that it was the last one Squire put out while alive. So yeah, it does look like there are people who really love the album here and there. But generally people are either like lukewarm on it or really don't like it, but it is what it is. I'm trying to remember what song it was from the Quest that reminded me of It Was All We Knew. I'm just looking through the track list real quick.
Sure.
Let's see. Oh, so it would have been Music to My Ears. That's what reminded me of that song.
I remember that. Yeah.
So what do you think is the legacy of this album?
I hate to say this, but other than it being Chris Squire's last and Jon Davison's first, I don't know if there'll be anything else. I think it'll be galvanized in their chronology and their anthology simply because of that. I think people will remember that more than they'll remember the music. That's in general.
Interesting. Yeah.
I think people will say, oh, that's the one that it was Chris's last album and Davison's first, and that's all they'll be able to cite. But how about you? And I don't mean to be unkind when I say that. I just think it's the reality of it, you know?
No, yeah. And like the members themselves were even like not as happy with it.
I was going to say that makes me feel less bad to be a little more transparent. I don't want to be the dick in the equation.
Yeah. So I think, there are certain Yes albums where people don't like them initially, and then over time they come around on them. I kind of feel like Open Your Eyes has gotten a bit of that. With Heaven and Earth, we're 10 years afterward, and it doesn't feel like things have really changed much. But I think people do have their favorites here and there, even if it's just a couple of tracks. I do think the albums that have come since have been stronger. So it does feel like it's been like
a conscious effort of developing forward, really.
Yeah. So like, if anything, like maybe people could look at Heaven and Earth, The Quest, and Mirror to the Sky, and if anything, study like the progression of those and the evolution in a way. And I think that could be fascinating in and of itself.
Yeah. And I just want to mention, since people are bagging on Open Your Eyes as some people always are, and that's fine. That's fine. It is. It really is.
Yeah, I mean, I enjoy Open Your Eyes, but I think you enjoy it like more than I do. So
I do, and there's a few reasons why, but I'll just mention the tour was amazing because the tour has, in my opinion, the best version of America if they've ever done. Pull out some bootlegs and compare. America crushed it, and it's the first time they brought back the Revealing Science of God since the tour of Tales from Topographic Oceans. And that was such a surprise. People were fainting in the aisles. People were dropping their popcorn, spilling their beer, punching their neighbor in the shoulder. It was amazing. Really, it was.
Yeah. Yeah, I get where you're coming from. Yeah.
And but they did leave out. There are a couple songs I would have loved to see them play Fortune Seller, and I would have loved to see them play New State of Mind. Two, I think, killer fucking songs. Those are both so good. Now I'm getting on an Open Your Eyes thing. I gotta put that album on, or go play to some of it or something in my studio. I really like that album, and we've said before recently for Igor's birthday and also for the latter anniversary that they really made a leap from that to the latter. That, if you go from album to album, that might be the biggest leap from one album to the next. I think we did an episode on that a year or two ago.
Yeah, I feel like we did. Yeah.
Yeah. And that stands way out there. Like Fragile to Close to the Edge. I don't know. There was a leap, but not something like they go so well together. But then going from Relayer to Going for the One, those are so different, and they're only one album apart and only one member different. So those little things always interest me. And when you look at Heaven and Earth, it's sandwiched between two things that are much better than it, and that doesn't do it very well,
Yeah, I do think there's a leap from Heaven and Earth to The Quest, but it might not feel like stylistically as big a leap as Open Your Eyes to the latter, Like it kind of feels like some of the Heaven and Earth DNA is still in there in The Quest, but they built more on it.
Yeah. Yeah. They made it more yes-ish.
Yeah. And in the comments, I'm also going to share this link to a show from that 2014 tour, which featured a couple songs from the album. Yeah. So this was in San Jose. It was webcasted back then. So in case anyone's curious to check that out. And yeah, I don't know. I felt like I had like something else possibly to say, but now I don't remember. So yeah, I don't know. Was there anything else you want to say, or do you feel like we've covered this pretty well?
I think we at least covered it.
Yeah.
When's our next show? So thanks for watching on Drum Talk TV as well. When's the next of each? You probably have the list more handy than I do.
Yeah, so tomorrow at noon over on Drum Talk TV, you are interviewing Eden Bahar.
Yeah.
And then
who's a Cirque drummer, by the way, from Israel, lives in the United States currently, and he plays a really cool Cirque show. So we'll get a whole different spin on another musical profession, if you will, to a degree.
Yeah, and then you're interviewing Derek Ferguson of Reef Astronomus on Thursday at 2 p.m. Pacific.
Yep, we rescheduled that because the internet went out where I am. And we've also got something that we are also so thrilled about, a young lady who's been on, I could say young lady, she's younger than I am. My bucket list since I started Drum Talk TV, an amazing jazz player, contemporary jazz artist, Terry Lynn Carrington. Can't wait for that.
Yeah, that's Monday the 21st at noon Pacific.
Sunday, and then 21st, Sunday.
Oh, it's a Sunday? Hang on.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, it is. Yeah, you're right.
Whew, okay.
Yeah. And but as far as Yesshift, we're gonna wait to hear about Steve Howe. Hopefully we'll get him on, and Dylan as well. An interview with him would be cool. But as far as anniversaries go, I know the 55th anniversary of Yes's debut album comes up.
It just sounds so crazy.
Yeah, that's on July 25th. So we may either broadcast like the night before or maybe pre-record. So we'll figure something out and we'll post
We
about
currently
it.
have it set oh, were we going to record it the night? I have it on my calendar for 6 p.m. our time the night before because I travel to Oregon for the Wounded Blue event the next day. So are we going live that night or recording it?
We could go live.
Let's go live.
Yeah, I mean it'll technically be the 25th in the UK anyway. So
there you go, and Australia and Asia, and so there you go. So we will go live, and we'll put a fun show together. Steve will put up some great promos with some great questions. And basically, and don't answer here. Save it for the post. Write us. You can write us. We'll give you that in a moment. But out of 55 years, if you had to narrow it down to 5 biggest highlights, whether a full album or song, what would those 5 be? That's my first question I want to ask everybody. And you and I will come up with ours as well. Who are the 5 top ranked album covers for you? That's another one. So we'll tie some questions in for people to answer that rhyme with the number 5 and sound like the number 5 and 55. And we'll see what we come up with. It'll be a fun show.
Okay.
Making this up as we go along. Those of you who follow Drum Talk TV understand that.
Yeah. No, yeah, I'm excited about this, revisiting that first album. So yeah, that'll be really cool.
Yeah, and if you folks want to send in those answers, you can write us at yesshiftpodcast@gmail.com. You can follow our simulcasts on facebook.com/drumtalktv, where we broadcast from for this show, facebook.com/yesshift, on YouTube @yesshift, and if you like audio only and don't want to look at this or album covers and other videos we show, you can just do the audio podcast version at anchor.fm/yesshift. Did I get everything?
Yeah, you got it.
And a baby's arm holding an apple. Oh, no, that's something else.
What?
Never mind.
Okay. All right. Yeah, it's time to end.
Thanks, everybody. Looking forward to that big show.
All right. Later, everyone.
Bye.